Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week, and of course at the end of the video, I have the viewer's pick of the week for your comment to have a chance to be featured on the episode. So be sure to put your pick of the week in the comments below. Now, also, I do have a Kickstarter going on for The Dancer issue 2. It's about a dancer/assassin. And when she was little, she witnessed her parents being murdered in front of her and never dealt with that trauma until now. Now, let's jump into the comics for this week. I had about 9 books, so it's a kind of smaller haul for me. So number 9 was Fantastic Four Reckoning War, issue 1, a book that I actually was really anticipating. I've been really enjoying Fantastic Four, and I was curious to see what they were leading up to for this kind of what feels like a big event, even though I think it's going to only be contained into Fantastic Four. Now, I will say I'm not a big cosmic fan, so this wasn't really tailored towards me. I also feel like this is a very action-heavy issue, but there was an interesting ending with Mr. Fantastic getting new Watcher-like powers, and I'm curious to see how that's going to affect them individually in the actual Fantastic Four series, and I hope there's a bit more character development there, because here, like I said, it was kind of going through the motions, very actiony, very wordy this issue as well. So overall, I'm going to give that 2 stars. Wasn't really my thing, but I'm hoping it will blossom into something else in the actual main series. Now moving on to number 8, which is Daredevil, Woman Without Fear, issue 2, and this is actually the second to last issue of this series, a book I was really anticipating and kind of let me down. I feel like story-wise, it hasn't really found its footing and hasn't really found its voice, and I feel like it's really about the past, it's really about what Elektra has gone through, and not really affecting too much what's going on in Devil's Reign, and then also as Elektra as a character, I feel like it's just treading old water without really telling a bigger narrative. It's very much about reminiscing. Artwork is pretty solid for this. This is an action-driven issue with Kraven vs. Elektra, but I'm just not really feeling the hook like I did with the main Daredevil series. That's kind of been my biggest complaint about Devil's Reign in general. So overall, giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7. Speaking of Fantastic Four, it is Fantastic Four Life Story issue 6. And overall, I thought it was a pretty good ending to the book. I really liked seeing it from Mr. Fantastic's point of view as he's trapped in his own head. I will say I feel like this was a little longer than it needed to be. I do feel like it was kind of winded just to get to that 2010s decade. But, you know, I had fun with it overall, and I enjoyed this format. I really liked it for SpiderMan. I think it worked a little better there, but I still had a fun time with this one. And if you enjoy Fantastic Four, I think it's a worthwhile pickup just because it's so different, and it's telling a very different angle with the Fantastic Four. And artwork is, as always, very solid for this book as well. I think it's Mark, the style reminds me of Mark Bagley. It's actually not Mark Bagley's artwork. There's actually a couple artists here, but it's very consistent throughout. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is the finale of Serial, issue 10, not the podcast, but it is, and it has to do with a serial killer. And I will say this, for me, was one of the weaker Terry Moore books. It's definitely not a bad book. I think every Terry Moore book is fun and also very quick to read. But the artwork is stunning in this. It's a final showdown between our serial killer and Zoe. There's a lot of good action there, and it leaves you on a cliffhanger, which I didn't love, because we're in the final issue. There's no announced project that Terry Moore is going to be doing. I'm sure it will be connected down the road, and we'll see more of it. But I was like, oh, this feels like an ending to a chapter, not an ending to a series. And I do feel like the pacing for this series was a little off for me. It definitely could have used its time a little bit better, and I felt the same way about this finale, even though the artwork is very striking, and I love the black and white style here. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and that's number 6. Moving on to number 5, another action-driven issue, Spider-Woman, issue 19, and this definitely digs a little deep into Spider-Woman's past and tackling a big part of her past, which is Skrulls, and who is real, who is not, and that's most of the issue. It's just her fighting Skrulls and seeing, okay, who can I trust by the end of the issue. I believe that the end of the cliffhanger, which was a little underwhelming, was the newer villains from this, or maybe it's a character I just don't know, but I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's an interesting cliffhanger, but it kind of connects to Devil's Reign, but again, my biggest problem with Devil's Reign is that it doesn't really feel connected to anything, and even the Iron Man moment is actually a Skrull instead of a chameleon, which was revealed in the latest issue of Devil's Reign, and they're both shapeshifter characters, so I'm like, why not just use chameleon? But it seems like every book is kind of doing its own thing, and I appreciate at least it tied into it a little. But like I said, it's mostly a Skrull action issue, and if you enjoyed that portion of Jessica's past, it brings it back up and maybe, does a better job at moving that forward. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and action was really well done artwork-wise here. So moving on to number 4, which is Batman, issue 120. And this has been an interesting series. I really like Williamson's voice overall in this book. I love the art. I love the kind of this painting style for the artwork. Really crisp, really great facial expressions. And even the artwork for the Maps backup story was really fun. And having a backup story I want to read is always nice. Usually it's about characters I normally am not interested in. So it's nice to kind of have this culty fan favorite character show up as this backup story. But this one, we get to see my favorite part, honestly, being Batman and this detective's relationship blossoming and them having this interesting team dynamic and seeing how they're similar. And then we get to the end where we get to see Batman Inc. has betrayed Batman with Abyss, which I didn't love the panel transition to that, because you get to see Lex Luthor and I guess he transforms into Abyss, but I'm like, oh, that was a little weird. I'm a little confused now. And also the motives just happened so quickly. I'm like, wait, what? What's going on now? I kind of wish they built it into the issue a little better, but still very interesting. I love the Lex Luthor and Batman dynamic. I think that rivalry is so interesting and something that we've never seen from these characters, but it's just such a, oh, why haven't they done this before? It's such a no-brainer. So overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. I do think there are some issues here and there, but overall a fun issue. So giving that 3.5 stars, like I said, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 88, and this is the introduction of Queen Goblin. And I was a little weary about this issue because I'm like, okay, I guess they're just introducing a new Goblin character but I honestly think they did a really good job at introducing her and giving her a story where Beyond actually is a little bit more interesting to me because of it, where we get to see Beyond, yes, is building superheroes with Ben Reilly, but is also building supervillains with this Goblin character, and there's a really good action sequence that has nothing to do with Peter Parker, but actually Ben's love interest and Mary Jane, and there's this really interesting ending where there's a moment where, Queen Goblin's kind of recovering, she is definitely not down, and then Ben's like, I'm gonna save myself and leave you. And there's this big question of, does Ben Reilly have the same knack for responsibility than Peter Parker, especially after this whole forgetting memory stuff from the previous issues. And I thought that was a really interesting cliffhanger, digging into the roots and the foundation of Spider-Man. So already I think that's what made me interested in this villain, even though I don't think the villain itself has done much. It's everything surrounding her, because Beyond kind of has this bigger plan for her, and how Ben Reilly reacts to it, and how MJ's the only one standing by the end. You're like, okay, how is MJ either going to save the day or escape this? So there's definitely a lot of interesting moving parts here. There's definitely some slow parts as well, especially more of the interviewing style of this book, but I was pleasantly surprised and looking forward to seeing where this villain goes. And the artwork is really crisp for this, especially the action sequences and when Queen Goblin's really at the forefront. But even the talking heads I thought were pretty well done here as well. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Dark Knights of Steel, issue 4. And I have to say, I was excited for this issue, but I was also a little worried just because you knew by the end of issue 3 that this was going to be an exposition issue. It was going to be like, this is what happened between A and B. And thankfully, it was an exposition issue done right, which I really feel like is hard because you have an exposition dump. It's a lot of just talking. But I feel like the way they utilized the flashbacks visually was interesting, but also there's just a lot of truth bombs and a lot of emotion instilled within these truth bombs, as it feels like a story is being told, a fairy tale is being told, more than just like, well, here this happened and here this happened, here this happened. So just the way the exposition was explored here, I thought was very well done. And yeah, the relationship between Martha and Thomas Wayne, and then also the House of L, was so intriguing, especially by the end, where Martha has a conversation with Lara and says, hey, I want you to take care of my kid. And obviously there's this bigger secret of him not being the parentage that you thought. And that was the big cliffhanger of issue 1. So I thought that was built up really well. But then you have the Joker showing up as a Green Lantern, and him being the one who kills the Wayne family, I thought was such an interesting twist. Makes Joker an even more personal villain. And then adding superpowers to it, I think that's going to be interesting, especially adding the Green Lantern mythos, and everything just feels bigger, and just utilizing the DC universe so well here. And the artwork, like I said, I think did a really good job at telling the story and pushing the story along for something that could have been very explaining and information dump, and I really feel like this issue avoided doing that, thankfully. So overall, I'm going to give that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to my pick of the week, which is Crossover issue 11. Man, oh man, what an issue. I know we're getting closer to the finale of this book, which I'm honestly surprised, but I feel like there's some answers to that in this issue, because most of it is a conversation between a detective and our writer, Donny Cates. So you literally get a view of what the hell this book's about, why he made this book, and how that's going to affect the ending. And it seems like maybe he had a different story to tell as the ending happens, because he's like, oh, I started this as a love story. And I'm curious, you know, you think it's the 2 main characters, because that's literally how issue 1 started. It's between the priest's son and our main character, Ellie. And now I'm wondering, oh, the love story is about comics. It's Donny Cates' relationship to comics. And I think that's where it diverged and transformed into. I do hope we get an ending to something that was started in issue 1, and we'll see as the story goes on if we'll get that. But I do like how this story has evolved over time, and it's just such a metatextual book, and I love that. I love that type of stuff, and I think it works so well here, and it doesn't get caught up into itself too much. And then by the end, you get to see Negan show up, and the build up to that is so beautiful visually, where you get to a baseball field and you're like, what's going on here? Like, why are we at a baseball field? And then you got the bat, and I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh man, Negan, that's so cool. What is he gonna do here? So I'm so curious to see what that means for the bigger story, and just how this story ends, and what exactly this story was about, because I'm still curious about that as well, because that was such a big conversation in this issue, and I don't really think we got the answer. I really feel like it's like, I don't know what it was about, but I do hope by the end we you know, they really build up literally in such a meta way. It's like, oh, I'm gonna write the ending that that's gonna surprise you. So that's gonna be interesting. But I really love this issue. I thought it was everything I love about Crossover, and builds up to hopefully an epic finale. So giving that 4.5 stars, and that is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was, and the viewer's pick of the week from last week was the same as mine, Saga issue 55, and here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.